Welcome to the family. If you enjoy powerful stories and wild adventures, subscribe now, hit like and share with someone who will love it too. The blizzard on Kepler 442b raged with a fury that would have frozen most species solid within minutes. Ice crystals sharp as razors whipped through the air, and the temperature had dropped to minus 60 degrees Celsius. In the middle of this frozen wasteland, a figure stumbled through the snow, leaving behind a trail of blue-black blood. Kira was dying. The exile's pale blue skin had turned almost white from the cold, and her forearms wrapped desperately around her torso as she fought against the wind. Her species, the Velthari, were built for the warm, humid worlds of the Inner Rim. This ice planet was a death sentence, and everyone knew it when they cast her out. The crime had been simple. She had questioned the High Council's decision to exterminate a human colony. The humans had done nothing wrong except exist in a system the Velthari wanted for expansion. When Kira spoke against the massacre, calling it unnecessary brutality, she was branded a traitor and exiled to the first uninhabitable world they could find. Now, 3 days into her exile, hypothermia was setting in. Her twin hearts beat irregularly, and her vision blurred as she collapsed into a snowdrift. This was how she would die, alone, frozen, abandoned by her own people for the crime of having a conscience. Through the howling wind, she heard something impossible, the hum of engines. A ship was landing nearby, its heat signature cutting through the storm like a beacon. Kira tried to call out, but her voice was lost in the wind. She managed to raise one trembling arm before consciousness began to slip away. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was a figure in a heavy coat running toward her through the snow. Human, her fading mind registered with surprise. What were humans doing on this frozen hell? Marcus had been tracking the energy signature for 2 days. His cargo ship, the Wanderer, wasn't equipped for rescue missions, but the distress beacon had been broadcasting on an old frequency that most species had abandoned. Someone was in trouble, and Marcus couldn't ignore it. He found her half buried in snow, blue skin stark against the white. An alien, clearly dying from exposure. Marcus had seen enough species in his 20 years as a freight hauler to recognize hypothermia when he saw it. He scooped her up, surprisingly light despite her 4 arms, and carried her back to his ship. The Wanderer's medical bay was basic, but it had a thermal regulation unit. Marcus stripped away the alien's frozen clothing and wrapped her in heated blankets, then activated the environmental controls to raise the temperature. Her pulse was weak and thready, but she was alive. As he worked to stabilize her, Marcus couldn't help but notice the scars on her arms, ritual markings that looked recent. Exile marks, if he had to guess. Someone had wanted this alien gone, and they'd chosen the cruelest method possible. Hours passed before her eyes fluttered open. They were large, golden, and filled with confusion as they focused on Marcus. She tried to speak, but only managed a whisper in accented standard. "Human?" "Yeah," Marcus said, checking her vital signs on the scanner. "You're safe. What's your name?" "Kira." Her voice was barely audible. Why did you save me?" The question caught Marcus off guard. Why had he saved her? It seemed obvious. To him, someone was dying, so he helped. But from the wonder in her voice, it clearly wasn't obvious to her. "Because you needed help," he said simply. Kira stared at him for a long moment, tears forming in her golden eyes. "My people, they said humans were monsters, violent, primitive, without honor." Marcus smiled grimly. "Maybe some of us are, but some of us aren't." He adjusted the heating unit. "Rest now. You're going to be okay." 3 days later, Kira was strong enough to sit up and eat solid food. The human's ship was small but comfortable, with efficient use of space that spoke to years of practical experience. Marcus, she learned, was a freight hauler who traveled the outer rim routes that most civilized species avoided. "Why do you stay out here?" she asked, watching him prepare a meal from ingredients she didn't recognize. "The inner systems offer better pay, safer routes." Marcus shrugged, not looking up from his cooking. "Inner systems ask too many questions. Want to see permits, registration, cargo manifests? Out here, people mind their own business." Kira studied him carefully. He was younger than she'd first thought, maybe 30 standard years. with the lean build of someone who worked with his hands. His hair was dark and unkempt, and he had scars on his knuckles that suggested a rougher past than his gentle manner indicated. "You're running from something," she observed. "Aren't we all?" Marcus handed her a bowl of stew that smelled amazing. "What about you? What did you do to earn exile marks?" Kira touched the ritual scars on her arms self-consciously. "I spoke against genocide. My people wanted to cleanse a human colony, men, women, children, all of them. I said it was wrong." Marcus stopped eating. "Which colony?" "New Haven, in the Kepler system." Marcus set down his spoon, his expression hardening. "I know that place. Good people. Farmers and miners mostly. What did they do to threaten your people?" "Nothing." Kira's voice was bitter. "They existed on a world we wanted. The High Council decided it was easier to eliminate them than to negotiate for shared space. And you stood up to them, for all the good it did. The massacre happened anyway, 3 days after my exile. 5,000 humans died because I failed to convince my people that life has value, regardless of species." Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "My sister lived on New Haven, Emma. She was a teacher there." Kira felt her blood turn to ice. "Marcus, She wrote to me about the Velthari ships in the system. Said they were acting strange, aggressive, her last message." Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the viewport. "She said she loved me, and to remember her happy." The silence stretched between them, heavy with grief and guilt. Kira wanted to apologize, to explain that she'd tried to stop it, but the words felt inadequate. She had failed, and this human sister was dead because of it. "I should go," she said quietly. "Leave you in peace. You saved my life, and I've repaid you with the worst possible news." Marcus turned back to her, and she was surprised to see not anger in his eyes, but sadness. "Where would you go? Your people cast you out. Mine." He gestured vaguely. "Let's just say I'm not welcome in most human systems either." "What did you do?" A bitter smile crossed Marcus's face. "I killed the man who murdered my parents. Turns out, when you're 18 and angry, and the murderer is a politician's son, justice doesn't matter as much as connections." Kira understood now why he stayed in the Outer Rim, why he'd saved her without question. They were both outcasts, both branded as criminals by their respective species for trying to do what they thought was right. "We're quite a pair," she said, softly. "Yeah." Marcus sat back down, picking up his spoon. "Eat your stew before it gets cold. We'll figure out what comes next after you're fully healed." As she ate, Kira found herself studying Marcus with new eyes. Her people had taught her that humans were savage, selfish creatures driven by base instincts. Yet this human had risked his life to save her, had cared for her when she was helpless, and was offering her sanctuary even after learning her connection to his sister's death. Maybe, she thought, her people were wrong about more than just the value of human life. Maybe they were wrong about humans entirely. 2 weeks into their unlikely partnership, Kira had recovered enough to help with ship maintenance. Her 4 arms gave her advantages in reaching cramped spaces, and her engineering background made her invaluable for repairs. Marcus had been struggling with a faulty power coupling for months, but Kira fixed it in an hour. "How did you learn to do that?" Marcus asked, watching her work with tools designed for two-handed species. "My parents were engineers," Kira explained, carefully calibrating the power flow. "Before I joined the military, I worked on atmospheric processors for new colonies. Ironic, isn't it? I spent years helping create homes for Velthari settlers, only to be exiled for wanting to protect someone else's home." Marcus handed her a plasma spanner. "What made you join the military?" "Duty. Honor. The belief that I was protecting innocent lives." She laughed bitterly. "I was naive. The Velthari military exists to expand our territory, not to protect anyone. Every battle I fought, every ship I helped destroy, it was all about conquest." "How many?" Marcus asked quietly. "Ships? Colonies?" Kira's hands stilled on the tools. "Too many. I told myself they were necessary, that we were bringing civilization to barbaric worlds. The propaganda was very convincing." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I've done things I'm not proud of either. After my parents died, I spent 5 years in a gang on Titan Station. We called ourselves liberators, fighting corporate oppression. Really, we were just thugs with a cause. What changed? I met a kid, couldn't have been more than 12, who was trying to steal food for his family. Corporate security was about to space him for theft. I stepped in, and afterward, I realized I'd become exactly what I'd hated. Someone who used violence to solve problems, who hurt the innocent along with the guilty. Kira nodded, understanding. When did you know you had to change? When I looked in the mirror and saw my father's killer staring back at me, same dead eyes, same casual cruelty. Marcus leaned against the bulkhead. What about you? When did you realize your people were wrong? New Haven wasn't my first genocide, Kira admitted, the words tasting like ash. There was a colony of Altarians in the Vega system, peaceful people, artists and philosophers. The High Council decided their world would make a good military base, so we removed them, all 60,000 of them. She set down her tools, her hands shaking slightly. I was part of the fleet that did it. I watched their cities burn from orbit and told myself it was for the greater good. But there was this one transmission that came through before we jammed their communications, a child singing a lullaby to calm the other children in the shelter. Marcus said nothing, letting her continue. The song was beautiful, haunting. It spoke of stars and hope and the love between parent and child, universal themes that any species could understand. And we killed the voice that sang it along with all the others for what? A military base we never even built. That's when you knew. That's when I knew we were the monsters in someone else's story. But I was a coward. I kept serving, kept following orders, kept telling myself I could change things from within. It took New Haven to finally make me speak up. Marcus moved closer, and Kira was surprised when he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. The touch was warm, comforting in a way she hadn't expected. You're not a coward, he said firmly. Cowards don't speak truth to power. Cowards don't sacrifice everything for their principles. I failed them all. The Altarians, the humans of New Haven. You tried. That's more than most people can say. Marcus squeezed her shoulder gently. We can't change the past, but we can choose what we do next. Kira looked up at him, struck by the kindness in his eyes. Among her people, mercy was seen as weakness, compassion as a character flaw. Yet this human, whom her species considered primitive, showed more genuine strength than any Velthari warrior she'd known. What do we do next? She asked. Marcus smiled, and for the first time since she'd known him, it reached his eyes. We help people. There are always folks in trouble out here in the Rim. Pirates, slavers, corporate raiders, plenty of problems. That needs solving. Maybe we can't undo the past, but we can try to balance the scales. Kira felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. A human and a Velthari fighting for justice. Our respective governments would call it absurd. Good. Thing we don't work for them anymore, Marcus said. Besides, absurd has always been my specialty. For the first time since her exile, Kira laughed. Really laughed. The sound echoed through the ship's corridors, and she realized that despite losing everything, she had found something she'd never had before. A true friend. Their first job came through a coded transmission on a smuggler's frequency. A mining colony on Zirion Prime was being extorted by raiders, pay tribute or face destruction. The local authorities were either bought off or too scared to intervene, and the colonists were desperate. It's a trap, Kira said, studying the message details. Too convenient, too clean. Someone wants us to come running. Marcus nodded, piloting the Wanderer through an asteroid field. Probably. But what if it's not? What if there really are families down there who need help? Then we walk into an ambush and die for strangers who might not even exist. Better than living safe while innocents suffer. Kira studied her partner's profile as he navigated between the floating rocks. 3 months of traveling together had taught her to read his expressions, and right now she saw the same determination that had driven him to save her life on that frozen world. You're not going to let this go, are you? Would you if it were real? The honest answer was no, and they both knew it. Despite her pragmatic warnings, Kira had already begun analyzing the tactical situation. Xerion Prime was a small mining operation with minimal defenses, perfect prey for raiders, but also a difficult place to stage an ambush without being detected. If we do this, she said carefully, we do it smart. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. Marcus grinned. When have I ever been reckless? Yesterday, when you decided to outrun that patrol corvette through the nebula instead of paying the inspection bribe. That was calculated risk assessment. That was you being too stubborn to give corrupt officials 10 credits. Same thing. Despite her concerns, Kira found herself smiling. Marcus's particular brand of principled stubbornness was both infuriating and admirable. He genuinely couldn't stand by and watch injustice happen, even when the smart play was to walk away. They reached Xerion Prime after 2 days of careful approach, using sensor shadows and debris fields to mask their arrival. The mining colony was exactly as described, a small cluster of prefab buildings and industrial equipment carved out of a crater on an airless moon. Long-range scans showed defensive positions that looked hastily constructed and undermanned. Population. Reading shows 230 life signs, Marcus reported. That matches the colony manifest, so either it's legitimate or someone went to great lengths to fake it. Kira ran a tactical analysis. 3 ships in orbit, frigate class, good. Weapons, but positioned for intimidation rather than combat efficiency. If this is a trap, they're not expecting serious resistance, or they're overconfident. They landed at the colony's small spaceport, where they were met by a delegation of nervous-looking miners. The leader, a weathered woman named Beth, had the haunted look of someone who'd been pushed too far. "Thank God you came," she said, gripping Marcus's hand. "They want half our mineral output as protection fees. We can't afford that and still feed our families." "Tell us about the raiders," Kira said, her golden eyes scanning the surrounding area for threats. "Mercenary outfit calling themselves the Iron Wolves. Showed up a month ago with 3 ships and demands. Said if we don't pay, they'll slag the colony from orbit." Marcus and Kira exchanged glances. The story felt authentic. Desperation was hard to fake, and the details matched intelligence they'd gathered on mercenary operations in the sector. "Why haven't you contacted the Colonial Authority?" Marcus asked. Beth's laugh was bitter. "We did. They said Xerion Prime falls outside their jurisdiction and suggested we negotiate in good faith with our business partners." "Meaning someone's been paid off," Kira observed. "Meaning we're on our own," Beth corrected. "Until you two showed." Can you help us?" Marcus looked to Kira, who nodded slightly. The situation appeared genuine, and even if it wasn't, these colonists deserved protection. "We'll need to see your defensive capabilities," Marcus said, "and get a detailed breakdown of the raiders' patrol patterns." As they toured the colonies' meager defenses, Kira found herself impressed by the colonists' resourcefulness. They'd managed to jury-rig mining equipment into makeshift weapons and had established a surprisingly effective early warning system using their mining sensors. "These people aren't helpless," she murmured to Marcus. "They're organized and determined. They just need an edge. Think we can give them one?" Kira studied the tactical display, her military training analyzing angles of attack and defensive positions. "Maybe, but it won't be easy, and there's no guarantee we all walk away from this." Marcus squeezed her shoulder, a gesture that had become familiar between them. Nothing worthwhile ever is. That evening, as they planned their strategy, in the colony's makeshift command center, Kira reflected on how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she'd been a decorated officer in the Velthari fleet, following orders without question. Now she was planning to fight mercenaries alongside a human exile and a group of determined miners. Her people would call it madness. But, looking around at the faces of the colonists, human faces filled with hope for the first time in weeks, Kira thought it might be the sanest thing she'd ever done. The Iron Wolves made their move at dawn, 3 days after Marcus and Kira's arrival. The raiders had grown impatient with the colony's delays and decided to make an example that would be visible from orbit. "Incoming transmission," Beth announced, from the communication station. "They're demanding immediate surrender and double tribute." Marcus checked his weapon one final time. "Tell them the colony is under new management." The lead raider ship's response was predictable, a plasma barrage, aimed at the colony's power plant. But Kira had anticipated this, repositioning the colonists' improvised shield generators to absorb the initial assault while revealing what appeared to be devastating damage. "Switching to secondary power," she announced over the comm. "All defensive systems appear offline." The deception worked. The 3 raider ships descended toward the colony, confident they were facing broken resistance. They landed in the designated areas, exactly where Marcus and Kira had hoped they would. The Iron Wolves' ground assault began with textbook efficiency until they encountered the colonists' real defenses. Mining charges erupted along their advance. Routes and modified excavation equipment emerged from concealed positions to unleash devastating firepower. Marcus led the counterattack from the south, using his knowledge of urban combat to turn the colony's tight spaces into advantages. The raiders were equipped for intimidation and basic suppression, not prolonged fighting against determined defenders on familiar ground. Kira coordinated the overall defense from the command center, her 4 arms allowing her to simultaneously manage communications, tactical displays, and fire control systems. Her military training gave her insights into the raiders' likely strategies, and she used that knowledge to stay 2 steps ahead of their moves. "Second wave incoming," she announced. "They're bringing up heavy weapons." The raiders had quickly realized they'd underestimated their opposition. What should have been a simple intimidation mission had turned into a real battle, and they were adapting accordingly. Powered armor and military-grade weapons began appearing among their ranks. "Marcus, they're pushing hard on your flank," Kira warned. "I see them. Beth, are your people ready?" "Ready as we'll ever be," came the reply from the colony's improvised militia. The turning point came when Kira made a decision that surprised even herself. Instead of maintaining defensive coordination, she grabbed a modified mining rifle and headed for the battlefield. "Where are you going?" Beth called after her. "To even the odds." Kira moved through the colony with predatory grace, her alien physiology, giving her advantages the raiders hadn't expected. She could move faster than humans, see better in low light, and her 4 arms allowed her to engage multiple targets simultaneously. The first group of raiders she encountered were advancing on Marcus's position using their superior equipment. To push back the colonist defenders, Kira hit them from behind, her precise fire dropping 3 mercenaries before they knew they were under attack. "Kira?" Marcus's voice crackled over the comm. "What are you doing out here?" "What needs to be done?" she replied, moving to her next position. The battle became a running firefight through the colony's industrial sections. Marcus and Kira worked together with an almost telepathic coordination, covering each other's movements and striking at the raiders' weak points. The colonists, inspired by their defenders' courage, fought with desperate determination. The Iron Wolves' commander finally realized he was losing more than just a simple extortion mission. His forces were taking heavy casualties, his ships were vulnerable to the colony's defensive batteries, and his reputation was being shredded by a handful of miners and 2 outcasts. "All units withdraw to the ships," he ordered. "We're leaving." But Kira had anticipated this as well. As the raiders fell back, they found their escape routes blocked by carefully placed demolition charges. The colony's mining equipment, designed to move massive amounts of rock, proved equally effective at creating barriers and obstacles. "This is Commander Vex of the Iron Wolves," came the transmission. "We're prepared to negotiate a withdrawal agreement." Marcus looked to Kira, who shook, her head firmly. "No deals with pirates." "Negative, Commander," Marcus replied. "Surrender unconditionally or we finish this." The final phase of the battle was brief but decisive. Trapped between the colony's defenses and their own tactical mistakes, the Iron Wolves found themselves outmaneuvered by opponents they'd dismissed as easy prey. When the shooting stopped, 2/3 of the raider force was dead or captured, and their ships were under colonist control. "How did we win?" Beth asked afterward as they surveyed the battlefield. "They had better weapons, more training, superior numbers." "They made the same mistake my people made," Kira said quietly. "They assumed their enemies were less than they were. Humans aren't weak or primitive. You're resourceful, adaptable, and brave." "The raiders never saw that coming." Marcus nodded, reloading his weapon out of habit. "And they didn't expect us to work together. A human and a Velthari fighting." Side by side, it's not supposed to happen, but it did happen, Beth pointed out, and it made all the difference. As they helped with the cleanup and prisoner processing, Kira reflected on what she'd learned. The battle had shown her something important about both species. Humans weren't the savage primitives her people claimed, and Velthari weren't inherently superior to everyone else. When individuals chose to work together, to trust and support each other, amazing things became possible. "So," Marcus said as they prepared to leave Zerion Prime, "how does it feel to be heroes?" Kira smiled, looking back at the colony where children played safely in the streets, like we're finally doing something right. 3 months after Zerion Prime, Marcus and Kira had developed a reputation throughout the Outer Rim. They weren't mercenaries or bounty hunters. They were something new, something the criminal organizations didn't know how to handle. They took jobs others wouldn't, helped people who couldn't pay, and left behind a trail of freed colonies and broken pirate fleets. Their latest mission had brought them to Europa Station, a ramshackle trading post in the Tau Ceti system. The station administrator, a nervous Terran named Rick, had contacted them about a slave trafficking operation using the station as a waypoint. "They move through here every few weeks," Rick explained, leading them through the station's crowded corridors. Mostly refugees from the border conflicts, people who got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. The authorities won't touch it because the slavers have connections in the colonial authority. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Slavery was one of the few crimes that could still make him lose control, and Kira had learned to recognize the warning signs. "How many ships?" she asked, keeping her voice professional. "Usually 2, sometimes 3, armed but not military grade. The real problem is their contact here on station. Someone's feeding them information about patrol schedules and customs, inspections. Any idea who?" Rick shook his head. "Could be anyone. Half the people here have reasons to avoid official attention. They spent 2 days gathering intelligence, moving carefully through the station's underworld. Marcus's experience with criminal organizations proved invaluable, while Kira's military training helped her spot operational patterns others might miss. The breakthrough came when they identified the slaver's contact, Commissioner Dale, the Colonial, authorities' representative on the station. He'd been taking bribes to ensure the trafficking ships never faced official scrutiny. "He's not going to confess," Marcus observed, watching Dale through the viewport of a surveillance post. "And even if we expose him, he'll just be transferred somewhere else. The trafficking will continue." Kira studied the tactical situation with growing unease. They'd identified the problem, but solving it would require confronting not just criminals, but corrupt officials with legal authority and powerful connections. "There's another way," she said finally. "We don't expose Dale, we use him." "What do you mean?" "We feed him false information about our plans, let him warn the slavers, then hit them when and where they don't expect us." Marcus considered this. "It could work, but it means letting Dale think he's outsmarted us. Can you handle working with someone who profits from human suffering?" The question hit deeper than Kira expected. Her own people profited from suffering, justified atrocities with bureaucratic language, and called it civilization. How was she different from Dale, really? "I've worked with worse," she said quietly. The plan they developed was elegant in its simplicity. They would approach Dale officially, requesting assistance with their investigation. He would naturally warn his criminal contacts, who would prepare for the expected threat. Then Marcus and Kira would strike from an entirely different direction. "Commissioner." "Dale," Marcus said, entering the man's office with Kira beside him. "We need to discuss the trafficking operation using your station." Dale was a small man who'd learned to compensate for his physical limitations with bureaucratic power. He smiled oily as he gestured for them to sit. "I'm not sure what you mean. Europa Station maintains strict compliance with all colonial authority. Regulations regarding—" "Cut the act," Kira interrupted. "We know about your arrangement with the slavers. The question is whether you want to cooperate or become our next target." Dale's composure cracked slightly. "I don't know what you think you know, but I assure you—" "3 days," Marcus said, standing. "The next trafficking ship arrives in 3 days. We'll be waiting in Docking Bay 7 with a full tactical team. Make sure your friends are ready. They—" left Dale's office knowing he'd immediately contact the slavers to warn them about the supposed ambush. What he didn't know was that Marcus and Kira planned to be waiting in docking bay 12, where the slavers would actually dock after avoiding the trap in bay 7. "Think he bought it?" Marcus asked as they prepared their real ambush. "He thinks we're amateurs playing at being heroes," Kira replied, checking her weapons. "His arrogance will be his downfall." The slaver ship arrived exactly on schedule, docking in Bay 12 just as they'd predicted. But as Marcus and Kira moved to intercept the trafficking operation, they discovered something that changed everything. The cargo wasn't just any group of refugees. Among the prisoners were a dozen Velthari children, survivors from a colony that had been cleansed by Kira's own people. They were being sold to research facilities that wanted to experiment on alien physiology. Kira stared at the caged children through the cargo bay viewport, her hands shaking with rage. These weren't random victims. They were her people's own children, the ones who'd survived the massacre only to face a fate worse than death. "Kira?" Marcus's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you okay?" She wasn't okay. She would never be okay again. The children in those cages were the final proof that her species had no honor, no decency, no redeeming qualities at all. They would murder their own young rather than admit weakness or failure. "I'm going to kill them all," she whispered. Marcus grabbed her arm gently but firmly. "No, we save the children first, then we deal with justice, but we do it right." The key. Raid was swift and decisive. The slavers, expecting trouble in a different docking bay, were caught completely off guard. Marcus and Kira moved through their ship like avenging angels, leaving no room for resistance or escape. When it was over, 43 beings of various species had been freed from captivity, including the 12 Velthari children. The slavers were dead or captured, their ship was impounded, and Dale found himself facing charges that would end his career and his freedom. But as Kira held one of the frightened Velthari children, trying to comfort him in their native language, she realized that victory felt hollow. They'd won this battle, but the war against cruelty and exploitation would never truly end. "We can't save them all," Marcus said quietly, reading her thoughts. "I know." Kira looked up at him, tears streaming down her blue cheeks. "But we have to try." Marcus nodded, understanding. They were both broken people trying to fix a broken universe, one small act of kindness at a time. It wasn't much, but it was something. And sometimes something was enough. A year had passed since Zerion Prime, and the Wanderer had become more than just a ship. It was a symbol of hope throughout the Outer Rim. Marcus and Kira's reputation had grown beyond what either of them had expected, attracting both allies and enemies in equal measure. Their latest mission had taken them to the edge of known space, where they'd discovered something remarkable. A small colony of mixed species, refugees from various conflicts who'd banded together to create their own society. Humans, Velthari, Altarians, and others lived and worked side by side, proving that cooperation between species wasn't just possible, it was natural. "It's beautiful," Kira said, watching children of different species play together in the colony's central plaza. "They don't see enemies when they look at each other. They just see friends." Marcus nodded, his arm resting comfortably around her shoulders, a gesture that had become natural between them over the months of partnership. This is what the galaxy could be if people like Dale and the High Council weren't in charge. Their relationship had evolved gradually, built on trust and shared values rather than passion or convenience. They understood each other in ways that went beyond species or culture, bonded by their mutual exile and commitment to protecting the innocent. "What happens now?" Kira asked. "We can't keep running rescue missions forever. Eventually we'll make a mistake or face an enemy we can't beat. Maybe." Marcus considered the question seriously. "Or maybe we train others to do what we do, build a network of people who care more about justice than profit." The idea had merit. In their travels, they'd encountered dozens of individuals who shared their values but lacked the resources or training to act on them. Former soldiers looking for meaning, colonists who'd learned to defend themselves, even criminals who wanted to make amends for past mistakes. "A rebellion without borders," Kira mused, "fighting oppression wherever we find it, regardless of which government or species is responsible. The Galactic Authority wouldn't approve. The Galactic Authority approved of New Haven's destruction. Sometimes the right thing to do is the illegal thing. They spent several weeks at the colony, helping with construction projects and sharing their tactical knowledge with the local defense force. It was peaceful work, satisfying in a way that combat missions couldn't match. But their reputation preceded them, and it wasn't long before trouble found them. The attack came without warning. A joint task force of Velthari and human military ships, backed by Galactic Authority mandates. Apparently Marcus and Kira had embarrassed too many important people, and the galaxy's major powers had decided to end their interference permanently. "This is Admiral Reeves of the Terran Navy," came the transmission. "You are ordered to surrender immediately. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force." Marcus and Kira exchanged glances. They could probably escape. The Wanderer was fast, and they knew the local space better than their pursuers. But running would mean abandoning the colony to retaliation. "What are our options?" Marcus asked, studying the tactical display. "We fight," Kira said simply, "or we run and let innocent people die for the crime of helping us. Those are terrible options. Welcome to my life." But as they prepared for what seemed like a final battle, something unexpected happened. Other ships began arriving, vessels belonging to people they'd helped over the past year. The miners from Xerion Prime, freed slaves from Europa Station, colonists they'd protected from pirates and raiders. "This is Captain Beth of the New Dawn," came a familiar voice. "We're here to help." More ships arrived by the hour, a ragtag fleet of cargo haulers, mining vessels, and converted civilian craft. None of them were military grade, but they carried crews who'd learned the value of standing together against oppression. "Stand down immediately," Admiral Reeves ordered. "This is a legal police action." "No," Marcus replied calmly. "This is a choice. You can withdraw and leave these people in peace, or you can fight 100 ships crewed by people who have nothing left to lose." The standoff stretched for hours. The Joint Task Force had superior firepower, but they faced an opponent they'd never encountered before. Ordinary people willing to risk everything for their freedom. Pirates and raiders could be intimidated or bought off, but these crews had chosen their side based on principle. "Admiral," came a transmission from one of the Velthari ships. "We're detecting weapon signatures that shouldn't exist on civilian vessels." Kira smiled grimly. "They've been learning from us. Mining charges make excellent torpedoes, and cargo haulers can carry a lot of them." The battle, when it finally came, was unlike anything in military textbooks. The task force's disciplined formations met chaotic swarms of civilian ships that fought with desperate creativity. Modified mining equipment became weapons of war, cargo containers became shields, and civilian crews showed tactical innovation that surprised their professional opponents. Marcus piloted the Wanderer through the chaos, providing coordination and support where needed. Kira manned the weapon systems, her military training allowing her to make every shot count. Together, they wove between the larger ships, striking at weak points and covering retreat routes for damaged allies. The turning point came when several of the task force's own crews began to question their orders. Human sailors watched their officers prepare to fire on mining families, while Velthari warriors saw their superiors ordering attacks on refugees and children. "Sir," came a transmission from one of the human destroyers. "We're reading civilian life signs on those ships. Families, children, this isn't a military target." "Those are enemy combatants," Admiral Reeves snapped. "Fire as ordered." But discipline was breaking down throughout the task force. Ship after ship reported technical difficulties that prevented them from engaging civilian targets. Weapons systems mysteriously malfunctioned. Targeting computers developed glitches and communications suffered convenient interference. "This is mutiny," the Admiral declared. "No, sir," came the reply from his own bridge crew. "This is conscience." The battle ended not with victory or defeat, but with recognition. The Joint Task Force withdrew, their crews unwilling to fire on families defending their homes. But more importantly, something had changed in the galaxy's power structure. Word of the standoff spread quickly through both official and underground channels. The story of ordinary people standing up to military might inspire similar movements throughout the Rim territories. Colonies began organizing mutual defense pacts. Trade routes developed independent from government control, and a new kind of society began to emerge. "We did it," Kira said, watching the task force ships jump to hyperspace. "We actually did it." "Did what?" Marcus asked. "Started a revolution." She gestured at the diverse fleet around them. Ships from dozens of worlds crewed by beings of multiple species. "Look at them. They're not following orders or obeying laws, they're choosing to work together because it's right." Marcus nodded, understanding dawning. "This is what Emma would have wanted. What your exile was really about. Not punishment for speaking truth, but freedom to create something better." In the months that followed, the Wanderer became the flagship of an informal network that stretched across the outer rim. Not a government or military organization, but something new. A community of individuals committed to mutual aid and protection. They called themselves the Free Fleet, and their only law was simple: help those who cannot help themselves, protect those who cannot protect themselves, and never let power become more important than principle. Marcus and Kira found themselves at the center of this movement, not as leaders, but as symbols of what cooperation between species could accomplish. Their ship carried supplies to struggling colonies, trained local defense forces, and served as neutral ground for diplomatic negotiations. "Do you ever miss it?" Kira asked one evening as they traveled between systems. "Having a home planet, a people who accepted you?" Marcus considered the question while reviewing their latest mission reports. "I thought I did for a long time. But home isn't a place. It's the people who accept you for who you are, flaws and all." "And who are those people for us?" Marcus gestured toward the ship's crew quarters, where human and alien voices could be heard sharing stories and laughter. "Everyone who chose to stand with us when it mattered. Everyone who believes the galaxy can be better than it is." Kira smiled, her golden eyes reflecting the starlight streaming through the viewport. "Then we're home already." "Yeah," Marcus agreed, pulling her closer. "We are." Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the small dramas of biological life. But aboard the Wanderer and hundreds of ships like her, something precious was being preserved and nurtured: the idea that intelligence, regardless of its origin, deserved dignity and respect. It was a simple concept, really. But in a galaxy torn by prejudice and exploitation, simplicity had become revolutionary. The Free Fleet continued its work, one rescue at a time, one colony at a time, one act of kindness at a time. They couldn't save everyone or fix everything, but they proved that trying was worthwhile. And in the end, that was enough. That was everything. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, but it was also full of possibilities. Marcus and Kira had found their place among the stars, not as conquerors or rulers, but as guardians of hope. Together, they had learned the most important truth of all: that warmth between souls transcends the cold vacuum of space, and that home is wherever hearts choose to make it.